the Cannabis Business Coach.
Hi, Mike Z here, author of the Cannabis Business Book, and you're listening to the Cannabis Business Coach Podcast, where I chat with and coach the highest performing entrepreneurs in the cannabis industry.
Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is the Cannabis Business Coach.
Hi, Mike Z here, aka Professor Z. And on today's episode of the Cannabis Business Coach Podcast, I'm joined by Zach Kobrin, who is a partner at Saul Ewing. And as an attorney there, he's done some pretty wild stuff in the cannabis industry, including advising on a huge $2 billion transaction. One of the biggest mergers or acquisitions in the cannabis industry? Is that pretty safe to say?
I think it's still the biggest.
Still the biggest. All right. Fantastic. So looking forward to hearing more about that. But Zach, if you don't mind introducing yourself, telling the viewers and listeners more about you and your background, I'd appreciate that.
Yeah, thanks, Coach Professor. So as I said, my name is Zach Kobrin. I'm a partner at Saul Ewing, a large national firm. I'm a transactional and a regulatory lawyer by background. I spent the better part of the last decade kind of working mostly around regulated industries, cannabis, hemp, you name it. I've got a kind of a wild background. I've been in-house for two multi-state operators. The first one was like true startup, helped basically take them from one state and 35 employees to hundreds of employees in 4 states and multiple countries. And after helping them go public, back into private practice, was working with a number of companies across the country. And then at the time, Trulieve was one of my largest clients, and they'd asked me to come in-house to help them with some of their restructuring and to help spearhead their harvest acquisition. So I did that, knowing it was going to be a short-term stint. Was there for about a year. This is like 30,000 foot quick overview, but no, I'm very lucky. Like I work with some really great companies across the country, corporate advising, outside general counsel, kind of taking my experience as understanding what the needs for operating are and applying the issues. No one really likes hiring lawyers, so usually they come to me and I try and make it easier on them. So, but yeah, I'm really lucky. I work with a ton of companies. My firm is fantastic. I've got an incredible bench of resources across the country. So as a firm, we work with pretty much most of the top 25 operators in the country, in some capacity. And I've got some really, really smart people that I work with. Nobody likes hiring lawyers, but we like to make it easier. So.
It's a necessary evil. No,
Yeah.
just kidding. Zach, that's fantastic. I'm really excited to dive into some of that experience because you've really been there in the trenches doing this at the highest level for many years. So no doubt you have some very unique insights.
Yeah.
But before we get into that, I always like to ask people kind of the origin story and how you got started working in the industry. Was it, a deliberate choice, or was it, like, hey, someone needs to work with this client, or, how'd that come about for you?
So it's kind of interesting. It's a little bit deliberate, a little bit sheer will, and a lot of luck. Before I went to law school, I spent the better part of 6 or 7 years working in government. So I had a real strong background understanding in regulatory and administrative law issues. I was at a small firm in Miami right when Florida first passed their medical bill, and we were working with a group that was applying for one of the first 5 licenses. And I kind of saw the opportunity as like, oh wow, this is a next niche. This is something. And I was looking for an opportunity to kind of grab onto, and I just got it. I got the process. I understood it. Something clicked really well. So we started working with this group, helped them with their application, helped them with all their partnership work, all their investment work. Fast forward, they win one of the first 5 licenses, and now they need someone that understands compliance. and it continues to understand their legal needs. So I started working with this company more and more, and I'm just trying. This is like 2016. I'm trying to immerse myself in this new industry, right? Everything is growing and expanding fast. It kind of was like the Wild West, that that old green rush that we saw. Um, and so I guess right around 2016, 2017, this group, which now is Fluent, was at the time Consortium. The owners came to me and said, listen, we're going to expand and we're going to basically do what every other company is doing, and we're going to go be an MSO. So I left my secure job at a law firm and took a shot, right? And it was great. It was a great learning experience. Um, you know, I genuinely saw like the boots on the ground, ground up, everything from having to be there and walk regulators through, do the full inspections, build an entire legal frame for a company, right? Um, because and this goes for more than just cannabis. Like most entrepreneurs, they start a business, they don't really know everything they need in the background. Um, so it was great because I was just doing it. It was just put my head down and go. Over 2 years, the company grew from, one state and 35 employees to, you know, 400 something employees operating in 3, 4 states, 3, 4 countries we're trying to expand into. And, like most companies then took them, they went public because everybody was doing it. Um, and right after that, I kind of realized, look, when companies go public, they change a little bit, they go through a transformation. And I kind of saw that as the right time to step out. I wanted more opportunity. I wanted larger platforms. I wanted to do more. So I went to a large national firm that really gave me a lot of flexibility and said, go generate business, go do what you got to do. And that's what I did. I just started churning, um, building a book of business. And fast forward a few years, we make it through COVID. And one of my largest clients at the time was a company called Trulieve, um, which was already one of the bigger companies in the space. They were looking to restructure their management and make some changes. They were also looking to do their harvest acquisition, and they basically said, we need help. So kind of knowing that was going to be probably a shorter term stint, year and a half, maybe. But it was too good an opportunity. Like I had friends over there, and so I just said, let's take the risk and jump. Um, and that was like a rocket. I mean, that was just like nonstop. For 10 months, I don't think I looked up. Um, everything from trying to restructure and rebuild their compliance team, help them with technology advancements. And, I mean, we did the harvest acquisition from LOI to closing in, I don't know, 8 months in a couple weeks, which is just unheard of. But no, I mean, there was a lot of really great people we worked with, and I had a ton of resources. But at the end of it, once we closed and it was transitioning, and it was time to move, right? Like I knew it was time to go, just because companies change even more, and um, so I went back to private practice, and that's what I've been doing mostly ever since. I mean, the reality is I'm just a corporate lawyer, right? Like but I found an odd niche in cannabis, um, and I'm really lucky that I work with a ton of really great clients and really great companies, doing a lot of work both on the marijuana side and the hemp side. Um, and I'm very fortunate. The firm I'm at now is like super resourceful, super appreciative. They embrace the idea of being entrepreneurial. So, you know, it's a good fit. It's a good opportunity. You know, and to be honest, I don't know if it's luck or unfortunateness, but like I've seen the industry now go up and down and up and down, and it it's the roller coaster. But 10 years later, it feels like, dog years. It feels like 30.
Yeah. Wow. For
That's the
sure.
30,000-foot view of how I got here.
No, I appreciate it. I'm gonna summarize for the folks because I think you've captured the essence of what it takes to succeed in the industry so well, or your story illustrates it really well, which is, you take your existing skill set, in your case, corporate law, you find a good opportunity, which takes a little bit of luck sometimes,
Yeah.
and you work really, really hard, and you know that's it. If you can manage to do all those things, and the timing is right, and get in you get in the roller coaster at the right part of the ride, you could be part of something really, really incredible. Um,
Yeah. And look, it's a lot of it is understanding how to read people, understanding when the right time to make certain moves is. I mean, look, I joke with people all the time. I burned my bridges and rebuilt them. You know, I me now thinks a lot differently than me 15, 20 years ago. So your life changes, your priorities change, but it's spotting when the right opportunity is, and just kind of taking the risk, And I've been
right.
lucky. I've been really lucky.
Yeah, that's I missed that part, that you took the risk and went all in when you saw that right opportunity. Having gone through all that stuff and now being on the other side of all those experiences, what's it like for you now when you think about the industry going forward and what the next 10 years might hold? And then I had a second question, which is, well, maybe we'll go with this one first because it's a shorter one, which is, are you entirely cannabis focused now, or do you still work with other industries?
No, I mean, I'm not. At one point I was, just because it was everything. But no, I mean, the reality is I'm a corporate and regulatory lawyer, so there's not much I can't do. And I've got clients that are non-cannabis clients. I would still say 80% of my workload is cannabis or hemp related. And it's funny because every time I say I'm going to start focusing more on this area, like I do a lot of antitrust work, which has nothing to do with cannabis, and I do other just general corporate work. Um, and every time I say I'm going to put more focus in that, cannabis clients show, more clients pop up, right? Which is a great problem to have,
Yeah.
right? But no, I think the nature of being a lawyer when you are focused on an industry is that you can't just be doing the one thing, right? Like it's one thing to say, oh, I'm a labor employment lawyer, or I'm a commercial litigator, or I'm a securities lawyer, right? But if you focus on just an industry, when the industry's down, you're struggling, right? And like, so there definitely have been times over the last 5, 6, 7 years where, the market and the industry's down. No one wants to spend money. No one's got money. And so you got to just be resourceful and say, okay, I am not doing just cannabis work. I'm doing whatever corporate or regulatory or transactional work I need that comes in the door.
So I guess along those lines, before we talk about the future, let's talk about where things are at today and kind of what the climate is for operators, for investors, deals. What are you seeing?
It's kind of interesting because I'm all over the place, and it's almost like subcategories of the industry, right? Like I do work with folks doing, moving in the beverage line. That to me is a whole nother monster. I do a lot of work with hemp manufacturers and hemp operators. That's a whole nother monster than the marijuana operators. The industry is too big to go away. Like it's just too big. You've got an industry that generates what, 30, 40 plus $billion worldwide, that in the United States employs over 400,000 people. It's too big of an industry to go away. I think lawmakers and regulators are missing opportunities, right? You know, when I can remember years ago, 20, 25 years ago, when I first started working in politics and government, and you know, certain lawmakers would be opposed to gaming, right? And it was ideological. It was like if you were in favor of gaming, you were voted out of office. Fast forward now, you look in a lot of states, and it's like if you're not in favor of gaming, you're voted out of office because they saw the tax revenue. So I I've always found it confusing where there are opportunities for regulators to come in and meaningfully regulate an industry to help generate revenue, to create new jobs, and they don't because of some ideological issue or because they just don't like the people. Like that to me is short-sighted completely. Um, that's like the story of cannabis, right? It's couple that with, and this is the unfortunate reality, is a lot of cannabis operators don't know what they're doing. They just don't, right? Like it's you've got the gray market folks that were doing it illegally for years that were just basically saying, I don't want a bank account. I don't want to, be regulated. I'm going to do it my own way. Like that's short-sighted too, right? Like this is big business. Like there's no question about it. This is big business, right? Whether you are the mom and pop who says, I want to open a dispensary because I think it's a great opportunity, or you are a multi-billion dollar company with licenses in 10, 20 states. I mean, this is big business. There's no question about it. So I think when operators, act a certain way, they get short-sighted. It's been this crazy, car accident of those two kind of short-sightedness that would lead us to this point now. I mean, look, I've said all along that to me, the biggest impediment, the biggest roadblock to the cannabis industry expanding, in my opinion, and people will differ, but like in my opinion, it's been NASDAQ and the New York Stock Exchange, right? Right now, if you look at NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange, they will not allow US plant touching companies to be listed, right? So you have a ton of blue chip industry companies that you would think traditionally this would be made for, right? Like 5, 10 years ago, why wouldn't big pharma jump into this space and push this like a nutraceutical? Like the amount of money it takes, Florida is one of the most expensive states to get off the ground in cannabis. Like the amount of money it would take to get off the ground is like the petty cash account at some VP, right? Think about it. Like the largest cannabis companies in the world are still smaller than some of the smallest pharmaceutical companies, right? Johnson and Johnson, huge CPG companies, food companies, Coca-Cola, beverage, beer distributors, all of them, right? That you would think, look at tobacco. Tobacco gets blasted and sued every day in every state, right? If they have a built-in manufacturing and a built-in national distribution network. All of these companies, to me, it makes perfect sense to dip your toe in the water. But I think because, and I'm sure there are other reasons, but if NASDAQ and New York Stock Exchange changed their policies and said, yeah, we'll allow plant touching companies to list, the amount of capital infusion would be monumental because you'd immediately see all these MSOs either A, uplist and go be on NASDAQ or New York, or you'd see these bigger companies buying up MSOs and treat them like true CPG kind of, or nutraceutical companies. So I just think that, like to me, that's been one of the biggest roadblocks to expansion of the industry. Now, a lot of people will say, well, they're waiting for the government to do something. It's true. Like, yeah, the government could have and should have done something. Biden was not as pro as people thought, and I don't think Trump is going to be as helpful as people think. So yeah, that's a problem, right? But we're like I couldn't tell you the last time I saw where a 30-40 billion dollar industry developed without any kind of federal policy behind it. Like, it's crazy. It's unheard of. So I know this is like completely off topic and like on the tangent, but like I just think the industry is too big to fail, too big to go away. It may recede some in the next 5 to 10 years. We may see some real consolidation. But I definitely think that we're looking at a spot where, the market is ripe for consolidation and the market's ripe for some of these bigger companies. I talk to people all the time about like beverages, right? And like to me, that's like a perfect example, because, why, if you're Anheuser-Busch or Coors, Molson Coors, why not jump in? You already sell seltzers. Like, you already have the distribution network. Why not jump in, right? It's so I don't know. That's like 1,000 ways off topic, but
Yeah,
yeah.
but let's stay there. 'Cause I like it. But we have seen some, Constellation brands, and we've seen, I forget if it was Altria or one of the big tobacco companies. Like they've dipped their toe, they've made some investments, but my sense of it is, for them it's still too small and too messy from the regulatory standpoint to go all in on it,
Yeah.
until there's that clarity from the FDA or the federal policy change or any of that. But
Oh
um,
yeah, you're 100% correct. I mean, it's like on one hand, you got companies like Tilray, which has basically morphed itself from a international cannabis company to a international regulated goods company, right? I think Tilray right now is probably fourth or fifth or sixth largest craft brewer in the world. They in the last 3, 4 years, I think they bought, I don't know, a handful of decent sized craft breweries like Sweetwater. Well, they didn't, but Afria did, and they bought Afria, and then they continued. But I think you get the point, right? So, like, I think you're right, in the sense that, and I see this with gaming too, right? Like casinos don't ever want to deal with cannabis, and the mindset really is we've got enough stuff that we're dealing with in our own regulated space. I don't want to deal with the mess over there. And that totally makes sense. I mean, I think it's the same reason why, look at Coke, right? Coke owns vitamin water, smart water, and coconut water. You don't think if Coke could put CBD in a product, they wouldn't? Of course they would. But I think they probably look at it and go, we need a little bit more clarity on what's allowed and not. We're not going to dump millions of dollars into infrastructure. Now, the flip side of that is, for a lot of those companies, it's not a huge capital investment. They don't need to go all in, right? You do a JV with a company, or you buy a small company, you test the waters. Um, you know, and also it's different when you're public, right? Like, I know that we kind of emailed a little bit about it, but like the edible arrangements, right? Like, that to me is a perfect storm because they're completely private. They don't have the restrictions and they don't have the issues that public companies will deal with. And they've got a built-in infrastructure of distribution and opportunity and probably minimal cost because it's all on the franchisee. So I think we can start seeing those kind of inklings. Like DoorDash is another one, right? Like with the delivery companies, right? It's lower risk for them. They're only delivering certain legal products, and that they do it within the bounds of what each state's regulatory framework allows. Then it's a risk reward analysis. And I think for some companies it's just too risky, like you said. But for others, they're like, let's see if it works. you know but I do think, like, getting back to like the whole short-sighted concept, right? Like, if you're some of these companies, you don't need to go all in, right? You can just go a little bit in, test the water, see if you get proof of concept. And I think a lot of companies miss that.
mm. So let's talk about that edible arrangements, because um, I think I think this is the start of, this kind of interesting, and you mentioned DoorDash too, of, these mainstream brands getting into cannabis. And effectively I think they're going to end up taking market share away from existing, cannabis focused or cannabis niche uh businesses. And so I'm curious to get your take on, what does this mean for the industry? Is this creating a new precedent? Is it going to, signal to other more mainstream brands and businesses that, hey, there's opportunity here, get involved? And then on the flip side, what does it mean for the cannabis entrepreneurs?
So that's such a loaded question. Let me unpack it,
That's
right?
what I do.
I love it. I love
Sorry
it.
about
So, no, no, you're
that.
good. I love it. So to the first half, I personally welcome it, right? Like, I am not one of those people that sits there and goes, if you're not part of the culture, you can't be in it. Like, forget that, right? I've worked with small businesses, I've worked with traditional stoner culture, and I've worked with big corporate, right? It's we live in a competition-based market and a competition-based society. So if more competition wants to get in, great, right? Is it going to chip away at market share for some other operators? Probably, but that's okay, right? Because the more people that are operating in the space, the more legitimized it is, and the more I think lawmakers and regulators have to sit back and go, okay, we can't just screw these people. We actually have to treat it like a real regulated industry. Knowing that, look, regulations change over time. I mean, look, 50 years ago, 60 years ago, look at cigarettes and tobacco, right? Like, how much has that industry changed with advertising, with, everything? But it's still around, the industry. Whether or not you agree with it or not, it's still around. So I think competition is really good, personally. And I'm a big proponent of, look, if non-traditional cannabis companies want to be in the space, then let them get in the space, right? Like 100%. Because the reality is, we're not reinventing the wheel here, right? I mean, this is not like cannabis is just a widget, right? It's just a highly regulated widget, right? So why reinvent the wheel? You know, there's something to be said about how beer and alcohol is distributed and how that industry is regulated. Why do we need to reinvent the wheel? There's something to be said about how prescription drugs and pharmaceutical products are regulated and distributed to consumers. Why reinvent the wheel? So, you know what? If we have a product like hemp-derived edibles that is regulated in such a way that you can sell them to the masses, right? Within whatever box or bounds or framework that's created. And some company wants to come along and go, yeah, I'm going to do that. We can confirm how old someone is, how old the consumer is. We can check IDs, do whatever you got to do and deliver it to the person. Great. I think that's awesome. For edible arrangements, it's interesting. The one thing that hasn't gotten talked about that kind of push is the logistics of it, right? Like they're a unique, interesting setup, right? Because Edible Arrangements is a franchise-based company. So they've got all these locations and they're all franchisees. So what happens if a franchisee says, I don't want to do this, right? Does that mean that they lose their franchise agreement? I don't know. And then also, like, I don't know if you've ever seen an edible arrangement storefront. It's not really a storefront, right? It's think of like a florist. It's not really meant for you to walk in and buy stuff. It's meant for them to store stuff, package it in a very pretty way and then deliver it. Like, where are they going to store these hemp products? How are they going to like, and I guess this is the in-house guy in me, right? Like I'm thinking about the logistics of it. I would love to sit down and talk to them and be like, this is how we can help and this is how we can make it work. But like, that's where my head goes is like, how is it logistically going to work where you got these companies just going, hey, listen, from now on, you are going to sell all of these products. Where are they going to store it? Where are they going to buy it from? Where are they going to get it shipped from? All that stuff. That to me is fascinating and interesting. And but again, I'm a legal wonk, so what can I say? But like to your question on the flip side, I think that like any industry, you're either growing to continue to grow and create a market share for your company, or you're building yourself up to get to a point where you want an exit. Like, I hate to simplify the business model down to that point, but if you are any of these traditional cannabis companies, and you now see these kind of blue chip traditional non-cannabis companies jumping into your world, right? You're either A, looking at that as an opportunity to partner or expand your distribution network, or B, looking at it as an opportunity to sell. Like, now on the flip side to that also is you could have some of these cannabis companies that are super successful and start buying up some of them. The beer acquisitions is a perfect example. Do I think, I don't know, it was Cresco or GTI, where they floated the idea of buying Boston Beer, right? Like, do I think they probably could? Yeah. Do I think it would transform the company into a different model company? Yeah. So I think it all depends, right? Like if you're one of the top 4 or 5, yeah, you probably are looking at those opportunities saying, maybe I'll buy one of these companies and it'll give me a distribution network, right? But if you're a mid-level, smaller cannabis company who's built a pretty well-known brand, then hell yeah, like jump into it and find ways to work with them because they got more eyes on, they have more eyes that look at them than you've got. So
Oh, I appreciate you breaking it down to the simple, because I think sometimes, especially in cannabis, people tend to overthink it and
yeah,
try to
yeah,
make it into this unique, special thing, which of course it has its nuances and idiosyncrasies and all that stuff. But at the end of the day, it's still a business, arguably a commodity, So um
100%.
I wanted to ask you about I just went and I looked at the edibles arrangements. They made the edibles.com website, and that's kind of the big news is they're selling these hemp-derived THC edibles. So can we just zoom out and talk about this whole hemp-derived versus cannabis? Because to me, this is like, there's a lot of things in cannabis policy and cannabis industry that are almost Kafka-esque absurdity. But I think this
We're talking about the
hemp-derived
Farm Bill,
thing,
basically.
yeah, because I think, you know, when people ask me about it, sometimes I just think like it's so crazy and silly to try to explain that I just avoid it. But I'm curious how you go about it because, the hypocrisy of it all makes me kind of, you know,
It's funny, it's comical. I have a 14-year-old son, and like he knows what I do. Um, and trying to explain to him that, well, I have some clients that sell stuff over here that's legal and some that sell stuff that's federally illegal, but legal in the state. And at the end of the day, it's kind of the same thing. And he looks at me, and my son's super smart, much smarter than I am. And he looks at me and goes, "You made no sense."
that's right. And that's how I feel when I answer
So here's
this
how I
question.
explain it,
Yeah.
right? A couple things. One, cannabis as a plant, right? You have two cousins, marijuana and hemp, right? They're basically the same strain, same genus of plant, with one's a little different over here than that. All right, so that's the first thought. The second one is that in the United States, I'm going to go a long way around this story, right? So, like 6 years ago, I was in Israel, and we were sitting down with like the Department of the Agriculture Ministry and all of their people that are researching and working in cannabis, and it dawned on us that they had focused so much on R&D and what could be done and hadn't really realized commercialization. Now, to the complete flip of that, the United States skipped all of that and went straight to commercialization. And why is that relevant to here? Regulators are so much slower than industry, innovation, and science, right? Somebody came along and said, we need I'll use a baseball reference, a Mendoza line, right? We need some kind of line that says, this is this is that. And it was almost completely arbitrary, right? But then science keeps going, right? I think, when the Farm Bill was passed in 2018, did most, I mean, I'm sure someone did, but most people didn't consider the idea of, wait a minute, you can isomerize CBD and convert it into Delta 9. Huh. Like, I don't think anybody thought about that, but science did, scientists did, chemists did, right? Agronomists did. And so we have this arbitrary line that says anything on this side is hemp, anything on that side is marijuana. And then they got even crazier and said it's on a dry weight basis and you're going to measure it when you harvest it out of the ground. Okay, great. But what happens after you harvest it? So I hate using the term loophole. I just think it was a failing or misunderstanding of the science. Um, you know, I mean, here look. So the reality is, the typical pharma model, right, was okay. You identify a problem, and then you isolate an enzyme, a protein, or some chemical compound, and you say this specific compound will treat that problem, right? Well, now you have the cannabis plant, which has hundreds of cannabinoids, right? Most people think of delta 9, THC, and CBD. Those are the two we know, but there's hundreds of others. And so regulators said, well, let's focus on that, just one cannabinoid. Instead of saying, we've got hundreds of cannabinoids to think about. And what they did was they opened the door for people to go, well, I don't need to deal over here, but I can deal with all the others over there and do it legally and do it in a way that generates a ton of revenue, right? I mean, that's the unfortunateness of the Farm Bill. So, yeah, like, are there certain states that have gone after certain cannabinoids? Yeah, like THCA is a perfect example. I know a lot of operators on the hemp side that don't want to deal with THCA now because of the total THC process, because the way regulators. So they're like, all right, screw it. We'll deal with THCP or THCG or Delta 10 or Delta 8, right? Stuff that comes off of a hemp plant, is tested at harvest as a hemp plant, and then goes on to processing and has the same effect as Delta 9. So what's crazy is, could they have closed the loophole in 2020? Yeah. Maybe 2021? Yeah. But now we're in a space where you have hemp operators that are generating millions, tens of millions of dollars, and are employing thousands of people. And what makes the hemp side so unique and fascinating is they have organized so much better than the marijuana side. I mean, monumentally better. I've been working in and around the space for a decade now, and watching like traditional marijuana cannabis companies figure out a unified policy. I mean, there isn't even like trade organizations in DC that are unified. There's like competing ones. But the hemp folks are like, oh crap, that state government's coming after us. We all have to work together. And they're like, oh, we're not just lobbying a little bit. We're going to hire the most powerful lobbyists we can. We're spending real money and we're affecting real change. And these are real battles for them, right? You saw it last year in Florida. You're seeing it. You saw it last year in Georgia. You're seeing it this year in Texas. So for those guys, it's a massive, this is not small money anymore. So I think we've kind of gotten to this point where, like, whether it was a mistake or it was intentional, there's no way of reversing that. Like, that toothpaste is not going back in that jar, in that tube, right? Is there some version of policy at the federal level that maybe tightens it? Yeah. Codify the total THC policy for Delta 9? Yeah, I can see that. A complete ban on synthetics and identifying what is a synthetic? Yeah. But like, here's the other problem. You need federal agencies to actually do something, right? It's one thing if Congress passes a law, but who's going to regulate it? USDA, FDA, Department of Health, like Health and Human Services, like who's going to do it, right? They're not doing it now. So, I think that if there was some legitimate action, could they do it? And could they, create meaningful regulation? And here's what's crazy about the hemp folks. They want regulation. They want to be regulated. They want to be normalized. Right? They don't want to have to continue operating in the gray. And I just think it's a missed opportunity, right? Like we talked about missed opportunities. To me, it's a missed opportunity. So.
That's really interesting. I think my take is the regulators, it's risky for them because no one wants to step up and say, here's how we should do it. So then if you're wrong, you open this whole big can of worms, and the status quo has been to let someone else figure it out.
Yeah, and that's a shame to me. But like, I mean, look, it's gambling wasn't at some point in the history of the United States, gambling was regulated and alcohol was regulated. You know, when you look at all these sin industries, at some point they were regulated, whether it's how you can distribute it, what it's made of, where it can be used, where it can be sold, all that. Like, I don't know why people are so afraid to have meaningful regulation that, preserves an industry, helps create jobs. Like, uh, to me, it doesn't seem complicated, but, you know, I'm sure there are 1,000 other things that are involved.
Yeah. Well, let me ask you this, Zach, which is, again, I'll preface it with a kind of tricky, loaded question, but I'm sure you could handle it, which is, so if you're advising an entrepreneur, a startup, or someone who's just getting into the space today, and you know, and they come to you and say, should I go into hemp-derived, or should I try and go into regulated cannabis, get a license, and of course I know it all depends what market you're in and a million other factors, but just at high level. I guess what I'm really asking is like, is there any reason for, you know, a small business or a mom and pop or family business or anyone like that to actually get into legal cannabis with, given the opportunities on the in the hemp side of things?
Yeah, so it's interesting. All of the marijuana operators I work with, they want to start doing stuff in the cannabis side. And for them, it's national distribution, interstate commerce, um, and less regulatory hurdles and quicker cash flow.
You mean the hemp side?
No, on the marijuana side, they want to get into
To get into the hemp side,
the hemp
the
side.
hemp-derived. Okay.
Now,
Yeah.
flip that. The hemp operators I work with, they all want to get into the marijuana side,
Huh.
right? Because
Cool.
in their mind, at some point the bubble's going to burst. The free for all that they've got now will get tightened. They want to be in a regulated space that's been more recognized and more appreciated. So it's kind of interesting that everyone wants to go the other way.
The grass is always greener, huh?
It's crazy. Like, I mean, literally, like I have, and like I have clients on both sides, right? Like I said, that they want to go, the other side. But no, I think, look, if you folks coming into the space they want to do the cannabis side, what I tell them is, look, as much as you think it's going to cost you, it's going to cost 10 to 20% more, like easily bar none. The regulatory hurdles you're going to run into are much greater than you think. You're just going to run into some the random pitfalls. But yeah, do I think if someone wants to get into it, it's still a good opportunity to get into it? Yeah. Yeah, because the reality is the nature of the market we live in now, I think that I get concerned that there is no real clarity on the way states are treating hemp, right? Like Minnesota over here, which is embraced hemp, right, and said we're going to regulate it fully and allow an industry, and then Texas over there, which is trying to ban everything. So I think that what I've told people is if they're coming into the hemp side, right, you need to start small and identify the markets and the items that you think you can do. Like if you know vape, then go into vape. Don't deal with edibles, just deal with vape, right? Conversely, if you know beverages and you think that's a good play, just stay on beverages. But also focus on like hey, these are the markets that we can go into. We can go into Florida. Maybe we shouldn't look at Texas right now until they figure it out. We can go into Minnesota. We can go into Georgia or wherever, So I don't know that I have the clear answer to that, but and I see the benefit in both, and I also see the downside of both.
Yeah. I think that's a fair answer, is that, you got to do your own kind of strength and risk assessment and have a game plan for why you're getting into whichever market or part of the market you're getting into.
Right.
Um, Zach, I want to shift gears and ask you about the investment landscape
Yeah.
and just kind of get a sense of from what you see, like what's the sentiment these days? Because I know, the public markets are volatile, you know, confidence about the economy is very mixed, and the industry itself, is fragmented. And I heard you say that there's going to be probably some more consolidation coming. But I'm just curious what your perspective is on that, and then as a follow-up, what advice you would give to people who are considering investing in the industry.
So I tell people all the time that if you're going to invest in the industry, it's not a quick buck. It's not a quick flip investment. Um, you are looking to park money for a later exit, right? Um, I think that's the first thing. I think the things that are important when you're an investor are, you know, I like companies that have really strong management and really strong focus. And because that, strong management trickles down to operational infrastructure. Um, I think there's something to be mindful of is that the cannabis industry, because of the way the investment structure is set up, they're all debt ridden. Like they've all got huge debt tables. Um, so I think that is something that scares people a lot. It's like, oh crap, that company's got $300 million in debt outstanding. Yeah. Do I think that that's going to be the death knell of the company? No. Because the reality is those investors don't want to foreclose. They want to see their investment pay off. Um, so look, I think if you're investing in the space, I think it's understanding what the opportunity cost is, right? Is, are you talking about investing in someone who's opening up a dispensary in a state that is overrun with dispensaries where, 1 in 5 dispensaries fail every year? Yeah. Or are you looking at someone saying, this is a new state coming online where there is a potential for 10 to 20% market share within a year, and um, you know I think that the typical things that investors will look at, but I also tell them don't be scared of the fact that, like, the things that would normally scare you off in an investment, don't be scared of that. Um, you know, you're not going to make your money back in a year. It's going to be a longer term investment. Don't be scared of the fact that they're sitting on a lot of debt. Um, I think that's a big factor. And also, how much, like, depending on how much you're looking to invest, how much control can you actually have, or how much effect can you have? Like, is it the difference of, oh, I've got $10,000 and I'm going to buy stock, or I've got a couple million and I'm buying 20 to 25% of an operator? You know what I mean? So I think that question changes the dynamic. Um, but the reality is money is tight, cash is tight. Like it's just there's no way around it. And I think that there are certain folks that still have powder, that have capital to burn, but I think money is still very much an issue for the industry. Um, I mean, look, I think one thing that really hurt the industry early on was this, 2016, 2017, 2018, when everyone was like, well, we don't have revenue. So we've got a, we don't have revenue, so we're going to basically plant a bunch of flags, and that's going to build our assets, and that's going to create value, right? And the problem you ran into there is that companies just started spreading. And instead of saying, I'm going to get really good at what I'm good at, I'm just going to spread out, right? And so you had a lot of companies that did that. And I think their thought was, we'll get to 2019, 2020, the federal government will ease up and we'll sell. And that never happened, right? So I don't know. I think I appreciate companies that are like, we're good at this and this is what we're going to focus on. You
Yeah.
know? So if I'm telling an investor, those are the things I'm looking at.
Awesome. And I'll ask you one more question, then I want to get you out of here on time.
Yeah.
Which is, well, I sense I could ask you an hour's worth of more questions, but you helped lead a $2 billion acquisition, the largest in cannabis. What are some lessons or takeaways from that deal that you could share?
Oh, wow. Okay. So couple things I would say. The first one is, do not be afraid to ask for help or ask questions. Um, I'm a really good quarterback, especially when it comes to deals. Am I the smartest M&A guy? No. Am I the smartest at securities? No. Am I the smartest at other things? No. But I really understood how to get people that understood how to do certain things, bring them together, and I was not afraid to ask questions. So for the one part is put your ego aside. Um, some other things I kind of looked at and I thought about are, do not be afraid to stand up and bulldog when you got a bulldog. And what I mean by that is, if your goal is this, if you've got a goal of getting from A to B, you find a way to get from A to B, no matter what. If you've got owners that are saying, this is what your budget is, then you spend that budget, right? If you got owners that are saying, I want to get from here to there, then you find whatever way it takes you to get from here to there. Like people that are, I'm not a mean person. I'm definitely not. I'm kind of a teddy bear if you ask my kids. That said, when I'm negotiating a deal, like clients like to hire me because I find a way to put my head down and push through a deal. I mean, there was a time at one point on this call, we had like an all hands call with all lawyers. And so this is literally 12 lawyers on this call. And I think I called the general counsel for the target at the time. And I said, listen, I'm going to be an ass to all of your lawyers and my lawyers. I want the deal to move faster. I need the workflow to move faster. I'm going to be just an ass. And I apologize for the language. And I did it, and you basically had these people who were lawyers of 40, 50 years going, who is this guy just reaming us out? And I wasn't afraid to do it because I actually knew that the lawyers on my side and the lawyers on that side needed a bit of a kick in the butt. And no one else was going to do it. And I wasn't looking to the CEO of either company to do it. So I was going to do it. Now, that being said, I literally got on the phone a day later with all of them and made sure they understood how much I appreciated the work they were doing. I didn't want them to feel like I was just doing it to be a pain in the butt. So I think if you're negotiating any deal, whether it's $1 million deal or a $2 billion deal, you've got to understand the room you're dealing with, the people you're dealing with, understand what you need to do to stay on track, how far you can push people, but also how much you need to show the appreciation. Like, thank you and checking in goes so far. Because the reality is you're going to have to work with these people at some point, whether they're lawyers in another law firm or potential now coworkers and colleagues. So I would tell people, continue to keep your eye on the prize. Don't be afraid to ask the right questions, and don't be afraid to be pushy when you at the right time. Not always, just at the right time.
Yeah, I love that. That's definitely an art, right? To know
Yeah.
know when those times are, and then to step up and do it in the right way.
Right, but listen, it's an art, right? Like, you made a good point. Like, also knowing when to pull back a little bit,
Right. It
right?
reminds me of the like the Last Dance, and those stories about Michael Jordan, Kobe Bryant, where they were like get on
Yeah.
their teammates, but at the end of the day, they were like, we got the championships, didn't we? So, you
Right,
know,
right. So it's yeah. I mean, I I know I know who I am, and I know what my friends think of me, and I definitely know that there are some people in this space that think, have dealt with me on the other side of a deal, and maybe I'm liked, maybe I'm not liked. But the reality is, if my job is to get a job done, if that's what I'm being hired to do, like, loyalty is a huge thing for me. I'm big on loyalty. And I tell clients all the time, my job has to be, how do I make your job easier? Right? So if you hire me and you say, I want to get this approved, what's the variance process? What's the regulatory process? Okay, that's what we're going to do. If it's help me quarterback a large acquisition, then that's what we're going to get to. And we're going to find a way, we're going to map it out, and we're going to clear the path. Sounds simple in saying it, but never is in action. So
not at all. Yeah. Well, Zach, thank you so much, man. I really enjoyed our conversation, and
awesome.
I appreciate you taking the time to share your experience and insights. I'd love to keep it going, but I want to respect your time and get you out of here on time.
Cool,
So
man.
before I let you go, anything else you want to share?
No, listen, I really appreciate you taking the time. It's been a fun conversation. I'll make a pitch for lawyers. Don't be afraid to hire lawyers. You need good, smart lawyers to help you with doing your work.
Let me give you a quick follow-up there, because I think this is a key thing. How, for one of those early entrepreneurs who might be doing this for, the first time, or one of the first few times, h- what advice do you have for them to choose the right lawyer, or how to assess a potential attorney?
So that's such a good question. Look, there are hundreds of lawyers that'll walk around and say, "Oh, I do this the best. I do this all the time." Here's what I would say. One, don't be afraid to ask questions about their experience, right? If your lawyer says he's worked with tons of cannabis companies or he knows so much, ask him what and how, right? We used to see this all the time where some PI defense attorney got 10 guys off for marijuana possession and then turned around and called himself a pot lawyer. Like, that doesn't work. So don't be afraid to ask the questions. Two, understand that good lawyers aren't cheap, right? And cheap lawyers aren't always good, right? Like, that's a simple fact of life. That is what it is. And three, don't think, because, like, you see this now with AI, don't think AI can do everything for you. The amount of contracts I've had to fix because someone went on ChatGPT to write it is more than you can count. Um, so look, the reality is, if something doesn't generate revenue, no one wants to spend money on it. But the three areas in any company that actually help save you money are legal, HR, and accounting. No one ever wants to spend money on legal, HR, and accounting. But those are the areas that will save you at the end of the day. And then the last thing I would say is, your lawyer has to make your life easier. If your lawyer is making your life more complicated, they're not doing a good job. Full stop.
Love that. Awesome. Very nice. That's simple, accessible,
Yeah.
and anyone could put that to work. So you're making my life easier today, Zach. I appreciate it, man. Thank you so much for the time and insights. And sorry I didn't get you out quite on time, but
Nah, man, you're good. You're good.
really appreciate it, and keep up the great work, man. And hope to meet you in person one day soon.
Absolutely, brother. We'll talk soon.
All right. Thanks, Zach. Have a great
Talk
day.
to you later. Bye.
Bye bye.
Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is
the Cannabis Business Coach. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is. Hi, Mike Z is.
The Cannabis Business Coach.